On board the Lightblade's transport ship, the Clipper, the Omega team began shouting at the same time as they strained against their seat straps. "Where is she? Where's Piper? Oh no. How could we?" Sienna was the first to break down. Sobs racked her body. Tears flew out of her eyes. Next to her, Nico began to rock back and forth in his chair, faster and faster. His mind sped back to the first day they'd all met. Piper had used her motorized wheelchair to pull him from the freezing water during their first competition at Base 10. Then she had helped him recover from what should have been a fatal sting from the deadly stingers on Planet Infinity. That meant she'd saved his life twice. And he hadn't saved hers. Not once. Both he and Piper had trained to be medics, to help people. It no longer mattered that he had planned to tell Anna that holding Piper wasn't right. He should have acted. With a gasp, Nico yanked himself free of his straps and began running up and down the length of the transport ship, a journey of about 10 seconds. He knocked over the extra coats that Anna and Ravi hadn't used on their field mission to planet Tundra, now 100 miles below them. He pushed through swarms of ZRKs that had raced into the Clipper alongside the crew and got a gash on his arm courtesy of one of the many nails that hadn't been fully hammered into the wall. Nico knew Piper couldn't be hiding anywhere, but he had to look. The Clipper was tiny in comparison to the ship they'd just fled, but it would have easily accommodated all of them plus Piper. The Clipper could have fit 10 Pipers, along with the air chair that had been specially made to allow her to travel in space. But there was no doubt she was not on board. He began tossing aside the crates that blocked the small back window. Maybe the Lightblade had a safety feature that would isolate a fire. It was possible, right? After all, their knowledge of the ship was on a need-to-know basis, and Colin, the alien clone in charge of the Omegas, rarely thought they needed to know anything. Sienna, Anna, and Ravi joined Nico. "Maybe the ZRKs were able to put out the flames," Ravi said, his voice tight with fear. "Those guys can do anything, right?" But it only took one glance to see that the ZRKs, who did everything from cleaning up after them to patching holes in the hull to keeping the ship pressurized while traveling at gamma speed, must have had their limitations. They clearly couldn't stop the super-hot liquid metal the crew had taken from Meta Prime from seeping through the floors and walls, igniting the oxygen that pumped through the vents. The Omega team members watched with sinking hearts as flames shot out from the back half of the ship, filling the sky with ash. Colin was the only one facing the direction they were heading, rather than the direction they'd come from. He muttered and cursed as he piloted the ship toward the Cloud Leopard. All his careful planning, all their hard work, and they'd had to abandon their ship along with the elements they'd collected. The elements, when put together, would have created a source of power great enough to give him control over every living creature on Earth, or anywhere else he chose to take it. The safety of the little blonde human was the least of his concerns. Now he'd have to figure out a way to wrestle the Cloud Leopard from the Alpha crew and from Chris, the brilliant alien he'd been cloned from, and his arch-nemesis. In the midst of his grumbling, Colin realized something. Maybe it wasn't such a bad thing that they were headed to the Cloud Leopard. He would have eventually had to go there to steal the Zero crystals that his team had failed to retrieve from Tundra. And his team had also come up a few hundred stinger spores short on Infinity. Once he had control, he would ditch the crew, turn the ship around, and go back to Aqua Gen to replace the pollen slither that was currently burning up back on the Lightblade. It was the only element so far that the Alpha team did not possess. Colin leaned back in his seat to enjoy the last few minutes of the ride. Yes, this would work out just fine. Plus, the Cloud Leopard was a much nicer ship.